Prepare yourself for a story that will challenge everything you think you know about wealth, power, and the true meaning of strength. This isn't just another tale of privilege, it's a raw, emotional journey into a gilded cage, a quiet storm, and a hidden secret that ultimately shattered an entire dynasty. Before we dive into this incredible narrative, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We absolutely love seeing how far these stories of resilience and unexpected triumph reach across the globe. And if you're someone who craves intense drama, powerful plot twists that leave you breathless, and heartwarming endings that truly stick with you, then make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. Your support fuels our mission to keep bringing more untold stories like Kenya's to light, helping our channel grow and reach even more people who, just like you, truly get swept away by powerful human experiences. Ready? Let's step into a world where true strength isn't always seen, isn't always celebrated, until it's finally unleashed in a way no one ever expected. The first rays of dawn were just beginning to pierce through the dense ancient branches in Buckhead, Atlanta, a name synonymous with unparalleled wealth and secluded luxury. This was no ordinary neighborhood. It was a sprawling landscape where opulent mansions stood as monuments to ambition, and where the air itself seemed to hum with unspoken power. Among these architectural giants, the massive Whitmore Mansion reigned supreme. A fortress of pristine white columns and mirrored windows, it was a place where silence wasn't just preferred, it was expected, almost demanded. Here, power wasn't acquired, it was inherited, flowing as naturally as the manicured lawns stretched for acres. But within these hallowed, hushed halls, something profoundly different was stirring. Inside the grand entrance, the soft, rhythmic echo of footsteps was a rare intrusion on the marble's pristine stillness. Those footsteps belonged to Kenya Johnson, a figure of quiet dignity, moving with a grace that belied the arduous nature of her work. Clad in her deep blue uniform and a perfectly pressed white apron, she knelt, her movements precise, almost reverent, as she cleaned the final section of the floor. Her hands, though undeniably calloused from years of tireless labor, moved with a firm yet fluid grace, as if she had not merely mastered a task, but had, in fact, mastered her own exhaustion. The morning light, filtering through the tall, majestic windows, caught her dark skin, making it gleam with a subtle, inner radiance. Her tightly pinned bun held her natural curls neatly in place, accentuating the strong, yet elegant lines of her face. There was an undeniable sense of quiet dignity in her every motion, even the most mundane and unseen ones, a silent testament to a spirit that refused to be diminished by its circumstances. Meanwhile, just beyond the mansion's imposing walls, in the meticulously manicured, perfectly symmetrical garden, a starkly contrasting energy was unleashed. Here, Brooke Whitmore, the youngest daughter of the house, was a whirlwind of controlled aggression, striking fierce blows at a jiu-jitsu training dummy. Brooke was a vision of cold, calculated beauty, long blonde hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, a narrow face, and piercing blue eyes that were perpetually half-squinted, as if she viewed the entire world with an inherent suspicion, always seeking out weakness. She wore a pristine white GI, personalized with her name elegantly embroidered in gold, a symbol of her status and her prowess. With every sharp arm lock and calculated strike, a smug, almost derisive laugh escaped her lips, as if she were constantly reassuring herself, cementing the belief that nothing and absolutely no one could ever truly defeat her. "Faster, Brooke," urged her instructor, a patient, gray-haired man, his voice a calm counterpoint to her ferocity. "They'll never stand a chance," she retorted, her gaze fixed, never even bothering to glance at him. "Not here, not anywhere." Her words hung in the crisp morning air, an arrogant declaration of invincibility. Inside, the faint sounds from the garden reached Kenya. It wasn't a sound that stirred fear within her, but rather a subtle hint of discomfort, a familiar unease. She recognized that energy instantly. It was the raw, unbridled arrogance of privilege, often disguised cleverly as discipline. As she meticulously finished cleaning the main hallway, the heavy front door swung open, signaling a new arrival. A uniformed driver entered, carrying two elegant, expensive suitcases, their silent presence a testament to yet more wealth. Right behind him walked in Ethan Whitmore, the oldest son of the family. Ethan was tall, athletically built, and possessed a strangely calm demeanor that seemed at odds with his opulent surroundings. He wore dark jeans, sturdy leather boots, and a beige linen shirt with the sleeves casually rolled up, revealing strong forearms. His green eyes were strikingly serene, and his light brown hair was slightly tousled, giving him an approachable, almost rugged look. He simply didn't seem like someone who truly belonged in this cold world of marble floors and hushed silence, and in many ways, he never truly had. This was a man who, unbeknownst to his family, was observing, evaluating, and perhaps even seeking. He moved slowly, deliberately, his gaze sweeping over each room as if it held not just decor, but a lifetime of memories, some undoubtedly good, others tinged with pain. As he turned down the hallway, his eyes, unburdened by judgment, met Kenya's. She stood, momentarily frozen, holding a bucket of water, a cleaning cloth still clutched in her hand. For a fleeting moment, time itself seemed to hesitate, suspended between two disparate worlds. His eyes scanned her face, not with the typical disdain or casual indifference of superiority, but with an intense, quiet attention, a genuine curiosity. Kenya, by instinct, looked away, her gaze dropping, yet an unspoken, almost electric energy thrummed between them, a silent recognition passing between two souls that saw beyond the surface. "Sorry," he murmured politely, stepping aside to let her pass, his voice a gentle ripple in the mansion's quietude. She responded with a slight, almost imperceptible nod, her eyes still downcast, but her heart had begun to race, an unexpected tremor in her otherwise composed world. Ethan watched her retreat for longer than he probably should have, a contemplative expression settling on his face. This was no ordinary encounter. It was a seed planted, a silent promise of something profound about to unfold within the gilded cage of the Whitmore legacy. He was here, not just as a visitor, but perhaps as an undercover heir, unknowingly beginning to assess the true cost of his family's empire and the hidden strengths that lay beneath its polished surface. The lingering tension from Ethan's arrival began to subtly permeate the opulent yet stifling atmosphere of the Whitmore mansion. Later that same afternoon, a different kind of warmth began to spread through the expansive kitchen, the comforting aroma of freshly baked cornbread. Sunlight, softened by the sheer curtains, cast a golden hue across the scene as the household staff moved with practiced quietude, orchestrating the intricate preparations for the family's evening meal. Amidst the gentle clinking of dishes and hushed instructions, Kenya, her sleeves rolled up to her elbows in a gesture of unpretentious diligence, calmly washed a set of delicate crystal glasses in the smooth basin of the soapstone sink. Her movements were characteristically precise and economical, each gesture a testament to years of dedicated work. Yet, despite the focused nature of her task, Kenya's mind couldn't entirely escape the lingering echo of that brief, unexpected encounter with Ethan in the hallway. His gaze, devoid of the usual condescension or dismissal she had come to expect, had been a disquieting anomaly in her routine. Ethan's look wasn't from someone who saw her as invisible, she mused, a flicker of something unfamiliar, perhaps curiosity, perhaps respect, having momentarily pierced through her carefully constructed shield of professional detachment. Just as the kitchen filled with the comforting scent of home-baked goodness, an entirely different kind of presence swept through the doorway. Brooke entered the kitchen with an air of entitlement, so ingrained it was practically a physical force, moving like someone who never needed to ask permission anywhere. She was dressed in the uniform of athletic leisure, tight black leggings and a gray hoodie bearing the logo of an exclusive gym embroidered on the chest. Her long blonde hair, still damp from a recent shower, hung loose around her shoulders. Her attention, ostensibly on the phone in her hand, was clearly fixated on something, or rather, someone else in the room. Brooke's gaze lingered for a moment as she observed Ethan, who was engaged in a light-hearted conversation with the cook, a warm smile gracing his lips. He seemed relaxed, almost unguarded, as if this bustling, fragrant space offered a genuine sanctuary from the rarefied air of the rest of the mansion. Then her blue eyes narrowed ever so slightly as she noticed Ethan's gaze flick towards Kenya, who continued her work at the sink, her posture betraying no acknowledgement of the scrutiny. A barely perceptible shift occurred in Brooke's expression, a subtle tightening around her mouth, hinting at a burgeoning resentment. With a deliberate slowness, Brooke approached the counter, a cold smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. Her voice, when she finally spoke, carried a sharp, almost brittle edge. Funny how some people forget where they came from just because someone notices them. The atmosphere in the kitchen seemed to freeze instantaneously. The cook, mid-chop, paused with her knife hovering over the cutting board. A cleaning man, quietly polishing silverware in the corner, stilled his movements. Even Ethan, who had just taken a sip from a glass of water, turned his attention fully towards his sister in Kenya. Amidst this sudden hush, Kenya remained a picture of composure. With deliberate calm, she finished drying the last crystal glass, placing it gently on the rack before turning to face Brooke. Her voice, when she finally responded, was steady and devoid of any hint of defensiveness. "I haven't forgotten where I came from, Miss Brooke. That's exactly why I know where I stand." For a fleeting second, Brooke's carefully constructed smile wavered, a flicker of surprise, or perhaps annoyance at Kenya's unexpected poise crossing her features. But she recovered quickly, letting out a dry, almost dismissive laugh. "Sure," she drawled, her eyes never leaving Kenya's. "I just find it interesting how some staff have been so distracted lately. Sometimes looking up too much can give you a neckache." The thinly veiled jab hung in the air, heavy with condescension. Without missing a beat, Kenya met Brooke's gaze directly, her own dark eyes holding a quiet strength. "Sometimes looking up is the only way to remember the sky exists," she replied, her tone measured and graceful, the words carrying a weight that belied their simplicity. The subtle power of her response seemed to momentarily disarm Brooke, leaving her searching for a new angle of attack. Ethan, who had been observing the exchange with growing unease, finally couldn't tolerate the blatant disrespect any longer. He stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable undercurrent of firmness. "Brooke, what's your problem?" He addressed his sister directly, his gaze unwavering. Brooke turned to him, a look of genuine surprise on her face, as if she hadn't anticipated being called out. "My problem? I was just talking," she protested, a hint of indignation creeping into her tone. "It's not my fault if some people feel threatened by words." Ethan took another step closer, his demeanor resolute. "You weren't talking, Brooke," he stated plainly. "You were attacking. And for what? Because someone dared to exist next to you without bowing down." A heavy silence descended upon the kitchen, thick and uncomfortable, like a palpable fog. Brooke let out a short, sarcastic laugh, but her eyes, betraying her carefully crafted facade, held a flicker of something akin to fear. "Don't be dramatic, Ethan. You've always been too sensitive." He held his sister's gaze, his own steady and unwavering. "Maybe," he conceded, his voice low, "but at least I still know what respect is." With a huff of indignation, Brooke turned and walked out of the kitchen, her steps heavy with unspoken anger. She pretended not to care, but the rigid set of her jaw gave away the depth of her frustration. Kenya remained still for a few seconds, the adrenaline of the unexpected confrontation slowly receding. Her heart was pounding, not from humiliation or fear, but from a strange sense of exposure. She had always preferred to remain in the background, unseen and unheard, and this sudden spotlight was intensely uncomfortable. Ethan approached Kenya slowly, his expression a mixture of apology and concern. "I'm sorry about her," he said quietly, his voice a low murmur. Kenya, without looking at him, continued to wipe down the counter. "It's not the first time someone talks to me like that," she replied, her tone matter-of-fact, devoid of self-pity. Then, after a brief pause, she added, her voice softer but carrying a profound weight, "But it's the first time someone speaks up for me." Ethan remained silent, absorbing the quiet strength in her words, understanding the unspoken battles she had likely faced countless times before. Outside, the once bright sky was beginning to cloud over, the golden light fading to a muted gray, as if the heavens themselves sensed the shift in the atmosphere within the Whitmore mansion. But inside Kenya, something had already begun to subtly transform. That house, which had always felt like it was constructed of cold, impenetrable walls and ruled by silent, unquestioned commands, was suddenly starting to show hairline cracks. And through those very cracks, a faint but undeniable light was beginning to filter in, illuminating not just the physical space, but also the long dormant possibilities within Kenya herself. The next day dawned with a heavy, oppressive stillness, as if the sky itself carried the unresolved tension that continued to linger within the Whitmore mansion's walls. The atmosphere among the staff was noticeably more subdued, a palpable restraint hanging in the air. Even Brooke seemed to be keeping a lower profile, avoiding unnecessary encounters in the hallways. Ethan, on the other hand, moved with a quiet intensity, his gaze more observant, more focused than usual, as if he were piecing together a puzzle he hadn't even realized existed before. After completing her regular duties on the ground floor, Kenya was assigned a new task, cleaning the family's old trophy room, a rarely used space tucked away behind the main library. The heavy oak door creaked open as she pushed it, revealing a dimly lit chamber filled with dust-covered shelves, framed gold plaques tarnished with age, and an array of shiny statuettes arranged with meticulous, almost obsessive vanity. A faint scent of aged wood and forgotten memories hung in the air. Kenya stepped inside with her bucket and cleaning supplies. Taking a deep breath, the stillness of the room a stark contrast to the undercurrent of unease that permeated the rest of the house. She carefully began to wipe down the furniture, her movements methodical, until something on a dusty back shelf caught her attention. It was a framed photograph. In it, a younger Brooke beamed with youthful triumph, a black belt cinched around her waist, and a gleaming medal hanging proudly from her neck. Standing beside her was George Whitmore, their father, his expression radiating an almost theatrical pride. Kenya lifted the frame in her calloused hands, her gaze fixed on the image. For a fleeting moment, long-buried ghosts from her own past flickered to the surface of her consciousness. Her expression hardened, not with anger or resentment, but with the sharp, undeniable sting of memory. 10 years, she murmured almost imperceptibly to herself, the words carrying a weight only she could understand, and no one ever knew. In that single, seemingly innocuous photograph, where Brooke so openly flaunted her achievements, Kenya saw a stark reflection of a part of herself that had been deliberately buried, a chapter of her life that had remained a closely guarded secret for far too long. She, too, had dedicated a decade of her life to the rigorous discipline of jujitsu. She had started at the age of 13, in the humble basement of a local community church, the worn mats her only arena. It was there, amidst the sweat and the discipline, that she had found a lifeline, something to hold on to when her young world had fractured and threatened to shatter completely. She had never known the luxury of a personalized jai, never tasted the fleeting glory of a gold medal around her neck, but she possessed something far more enduring. She had the own technique, the raw, unyielding strength, and a depth of resilience forged in the crucible of personal hardship, a formidable arsenal that no one within the opulent walls of the Whitmore mansion even remotely suspected existed. A small, ironic smile touched her lips, a fleeting expression tinged with melancholy, a silent acknowledgement of the vast chasm between her hidden reality and the assumptions of the world around her. Later that day, as the afternoon shadows began to lengthen, Kenya seized a rare moment of respite between her assigned tasks. She found a solitary spot in the sprawling backyard, seeking refuge beneath the sprawling branches of an ancient tree, its gnarled limbs reaching skyward like supplicating arms. She slipped off her worn sneakers, allowing her tired feet to sink into the cool, damp grass, and closed her eyes, taking a long, deep breath, as if attempting to quell an inner storm she had been silently battling for years. "Do you like silence?" Ethan's voice, a gentle intrusion, snapped her out of her reverie. He approached from behind, holding a steaming mug of tea, dressed casually in a light shirt and linen pants. There was something undeniably different about him in that moment. Perhaps it was the respectful, non-intrusive way he approached her, or perhaps it was the genuine curiosity in his eyes. But for whatever reason, Kenya didn't immediately rise to her feet, didn't instinctively retreat back into her role. "Sometimes silence is the only place where you can hear yourself," she replied, her voice soft but steady, not even bothering to turn around, a subtle acknowledgement of a connection that was beginning to form between them. He settled down a respectful distance away, resting his forearms on his knees, his gaze thoughtful. "I saw you in the trophy room today," he said, his tone gentle. "Were you looking at Brooke?" Kenya took another slow, deliberate breath before answering, her dark eyes finally meeting his. I was remembering. A beat of silence hung between them. Remembering what? Ethan prompted softly, his gaze intent. Kenya's voice was low, almost a whisper, yet each word resonated with a profound weight of experience. Remembering who I used to be, or perhaps who I still am, even if no one knows it. Ethan remained silent, his gaze unwavering, listening with an intensity that spoke volumes. I trained jiu-jitsu for 10 years, she finally revealed, her voice low but remarkably steady, the words a quiet declaration of a hidden truth. Not because I wanted to be a champion, she continued, her eyes holding a distant, almost painful memory. It was the only place where the world stopped hurting. And then, with a quiet dignity and a palpable depth of emotion, she shared fragments of her story. The poorly explained robbery that had taken her partner, leaving her alone with a small daughter to raise. The endless nights spent scrubbing staircases by day and training relentlessly at night. The physical and mental discipline, the only thing that had kept her from completely falling apart. Her voice, though soft, carried an undeniable strength, a testament to her unwavering spirit. I'm not just the woman who cleansed the floors in this house, Mr. Ethan, she stated, her gaze finally meeting his without flinching. And I don't want pity, I just want respect. He looked at her, his expression a complex mix of surprise and profound admiration. You speak like someone who's fought more off the mat than on it, he observed, his voice filled with a newfound understanding. Kenya met his gaze directly, without any of her previous hesitation. That's because it's true. The silence that fell between them then was different from the polite, strained silences of the mansion. It was heavier now, charged with a newfound intimacy, filled with the weight of shared vulnerability and the burgeoning recognition of a deeper connection. It was no longer just an exchange of words. It was the delicate, tentative beginning of an exchange of truths. A small, genuine smile touched Ethan's lips, born of a profound and burgeoning respect. I'd love to see you fight one day, he said softly. Kenya stood, picking up her sneakers, her gaze holding a knowing glint. Maybe one day you will, she replied, a hint of a smile playing on her own lips. But the real fights in this house don't happen in the ring. As she walked away, her silhouette framed against the fading light, Ethan watched her with a gaze that held a dawning comprehension, as if he were seeing a world that had been invisible to him until that very moment. And for the first time, he didn't see a staff member. He saw a woman of strength, resilience, and quiet dignity. And in that instant, Ethan knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within his soul, that he would never truly see her any other way again. The gilded cage of his privilege had begun to feel increasingly hollow, and the unseen strength he had just glimpsed had stirred something profound within him, hinting at a reckoning to come. The Whitmore mansion, usually a bastion of quiet opulence, hummed with a different kind of energy that Saturday night. It was the traditional family dinner, but tonight the guest list had expanded to include a carefully curated selection of influential figures, longtime investors whose fortunes intertwined with the Whitmore empire, 2 local politicians whose smiles were as polished as their shoes, and, most notably, a famous jiu-jitsu coach whom Brooke was desperately eager to impress. The sprawling dining table, a masterpiece of polished mahogany, was draped in a pristine white linen tablecloth, gleaming with an array of French china that caught the light. In the very center, a luxurious floral arrangement, a riot of exotic blooms, competed for attention with the delicate clinking of crystal glasses and the low hum of polite conversation, punctuated by bursts of carefully modulated but often insincere laughter. Amidst this spectacle of wealth and calculated charm, Kenya moved with an almost ethereal discretion, a silent ballet of service. She poured wine with impeccable posture, her movements fluid and efficient, a stark contrast to the performative ease of the guests. She wore the staff's most formal uniform, a crisp white blouse with tightly cuffed sleeves, neatly pressed black pants, and her hair pulled back into a severe, elegant bun atop her head. Her eyes, trained by years of quiet observation, rarely strayed from her duties, yet they missed nothing. She noted every subtle shift in the room, every fleeting glance, and most acutely, Brooke's increasingly agitated expressions. Brooke's gaze frequently darted towards Ethan, then towards Kenya, a silent fury building within her as she witnessed the effortless ease with which her brother interacted with the maid. Ethan's words to Kenya were always kind, his smiles genuine, a stark departure from the detached politeness he usually afforded the staff. It was a discomfort Brooke couldn't quite articulate, a gnawing irritation that she instinctively knew she wanted gone. This unspoken connection between Ethan and Kenya, so natural and unforced, was a direct affront to Brooke's carefully constructed world, a subtle challenge to the rigid social order she believed in. After the elaborate dessert course had been served, and as the conversation around the table shifted, predictably, to athletic achievements and international medals, a topic Brooke reveled in, she seized her moment. With a smile that dripped with a chilling, almost venomous sweetness, Brooke spoke up, her fork still poised delicately in her hand, as if she were merely commenting on the weather. "Funny," she began, her voice carrying just enough volume to capture the attention of the entire table. "Today I found out one of our staff members here also has some experience in jiu-jitsu." A ripple of polite confusion spread through the guests. They exchanged uncertain glances, unsure if this was a strange joke, a backhanded compliment, or something else entirely. "Imagine that," Brooke continued, her eyes fixed on Kenya, who remained near the fireplace, meticulously arranging empty glasses on a silver tray. 10 years of training, and no one knew. Kenya's shoulders remained firm, her posture unwavering, but the air around her seemed to thicken, suspended in a moment of tense anticipation. Brooke leaned forward slightly, her blue eyes sharp and predatory, pinning Kenya in their gaze. "Kenya," she challenged, her voice laced with a mocking disbelief, "is it true, or did you just learn from watching YouTube videos?" A few guests offered nervous, uncomfortable laughs, while others simply looked away, embarrassed by the blatant public humiliation unfolding before them. Ethan, who had been watching the scene with growing anger, straightened in his chair, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. Kenya, however, remained a picture of serene composure. She calmly placed the tray on the sideboard, then turned slowly, her dark eyes meeting Brooke's without haste, without fear. "It's true," she said, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the strained silence. "I learned the hard way. But I learned." Brooke's smile hardened, a flicker of genuine irritation replacing her earlier amusement. "Then why have you never competed?" she challenged, as if the lack of trophies somehow nullified Kenya's decade of dedication. 10 years and no trophies. What a waste. A small, profound smile touched Kenya's lips then, one that didn't originate from mere amusement, but from the very depth of her soul, a quiet understanding that transcended the superficiality of the room. "Some trophies," she stated, her voice soft but resonating with an undeniable truth, "we carry on the inside." The room fell into a complete, stunned silence. Brooke's eyebrow arched in a gesture of dismissive mockery, and with a flourish, she lifted her glass. "Well, if you've got the courage," she drawled, her voice dripping with challenge, "how about a friendly match right here? Just for fun, of course. Just let's see if your theory works in practice." The atmosphere in the dining room teetered precariously between nervous, uncomfortable laughter and outright shock. Ethan looked at his sister in utter disbelief, his face a mask of controlled fury. Their mother, a frail figure in the background, coughed delicately, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating drama. Kenya, however, didn't move. She simply crossed her arms gently, her posture radiating an inner calm that was more cutting than any shout. "Be careful what you wish for," she replied, her voice soft but imbued with an almost prophetic certainty, "because sometimes you get it." Brooke's artificial smile remained fixed, but her eyes, burning with a fierce internal fire, betrayed her true emotions. She knew, even if she wouldn't admit it, that Kenya was not like the others, and that perhaps, just perhaps, she had pushed too far. Then, with a decisive gesture, she raised her glass as if sealing an irrevocable deal. "Then it's settled," she declared. "Sunday, late afternoon. A light match. Nothing major." "For you, maybe," Kenya retorted, her voice a quiet counterpoint to Brooke's bravado. She picked up the tray of glasses and, with her head held high, walked out of the room, leaving behind a stunned silence. Ethan remained seated, his eyes fixed on nothing, his mind reeling. He knew this wasn't just a casual provocation. It was a calculated, cruel attempt at public humiliation, a desperate bid by Brooke to reassert her perceived superiority. And he also knew, with a certainty that chilled him, that Kenya was not the kind of woman who would allow herself to be taken down without a fight. As the mansion lights slowly dimmed that night, a restless energy permeated the air. Upstairs, Brooke stood by her bedroom window, watching the garden below. Outside, the wind howled, shaking the tall, ancient trees as if sensing the storm that was about to begin. A tempest brewing not just in the skies, but within the very foundations of the Whitmore family. The next morning, the mansion was still steeped in a profound, almost unnatural silence when Ethan descended the grand staircase. He moved with a quiet purpose, dressed simply in a t-shirt and dark sweatpants, his face carrying a weight he couldn't quite explain, as if something deep within him had awakened with the rising sun. He passed the dining room, where faint traces of the previous night's lavish dinner still lingered. A crooked glass here, a forgotten napkin there. Everything looked the same, yet nothing truly was. The superficial order of the house felt like a thin veneer over a simmering chaos. He walked through the hallway to the back of the house and stepped into the garden, where the grass was still wet with the morning dew, glistening like scattered diamonds. Kenya was already there, kneeling near the side shed, meticulously organizing cleaning supplies into a box. She wore practical yellow gloves, her hair pulled back in a simple, functional bun. Her face in repose was serene, yet there was an undeniable, quiet strength in her posture, a subtle readiness in her body, as if she were already prepared for the monumental challenge that lay ahead. Ethan stopped a few feet away, observing her for a few silent seconds before finally speaking. "You don't have to do this," he said, his voice low, almost a plea. Kenya looked up slowly, her gaze calm and unsurprised, as if she had been expecting him. "Good morning," she replied, a slight, gentle smile touching her lips. "I thought everyone was still asleep." "I woke up with my head spinning," he admitted, stepping closer, his voice laced with a raw honesty. "I kept thinking about what happened last night, what Brooke did. That wasn't fair." Kenya removed her gloves, stood, and calmly wiped her hands on the cloth tucked at her waist. "Justice isn't something I expect," she stated, her voice steady, her eyes meeting his. "It's something I've learned to carry with me, even when no one else does." Ethan's gaze intensified. "Are you going to accept her challenge?" he asked, more directly now, the question hanging in the crisp morning air. Kenya took a deep, deliberate breath, her dark eyes meeting his with unwavering calm. "I'm not fighting Brooke," she said, her voice firm, resolute. "I'm fighting what she represents. Arrogance, inherited privilege, the idea that some are born to rule and others to bow. That's followed me for as long as I can remember. And last night, she challenged all of that in public." Ethan remained silent, a lump forming in his throat. The woman standing before him wasn't just brave. She was someone who had survived battles he, with all his privilege, could never even begin to imagine facing. "You're the strongest person I've ever met," he murmured, his eyes glassy with unshed emotion. "And I don't even really know your last name." Kenya smiled faintly, though her own eyes were now misty too, reflecting the unexpected depth of his words. "Johnson, Kenya Johnson," she recited, her voice a quiet litany of self-definition. "Born in South Atlanta, daughter of a maid, single mother, purple belt in jiu-jitsu, but invisible in any room where power sits. And still, here I am." The silence between them deepened, charged with an unspoken understanding. Ethan stepped a little closer, drawn by an invisible force. She didn't move back, didn't flinch. "I don't know what's happening to me," he said almost in a whisper, his voice raw with a burgeoning emotion. "But when I'm around you, everything feels clearer." Before he could overthink, before doubt could creep in, Ethan gently took her by the arm. He leaned in and he kissed her. It was an impulsive kiss, warm and tense, yet undeniably full of a profound truth. Kenya kissed him back, but only for a second, then pulled away, her eyes wide with surprise, both of them breathless and stunned by their own boldness. "I'm sorry," Ethan stammered, confused by the intensity of the moment. "No," she replied, shaking her head, her voice still a whisper. "Don't apologize. I just didn't expect it." They stared at each other for another moment, speechless, the world around them momentarily forgotten. Something profound had been born there, in the middle of the unexpected, something that even fear could not erase. Meanwhile, upstairs in the mansion, entirely oblivious to the profound connection blossoming in the garden, Brooke scrolled furiously through the household files on her tablet. A nagging suspicion had been bothering her since the previous night, a sense that there was something more behind Kenya's quiet confidence, something she couldn't quite place. Her fingers flew across the screen, her frustration mounting with each fruitless search. Finally, with a surge of desperate determination, she typed Kenya's full name into the database. What she found made her eyes widen in disbelief, then narrow with a chilling mixture of fear and rage. Scanned certificates, competition photos, school trophies, a hidden history of athletic prowess. And then a copy of a faded 2013 community newspaper, its headline screaming, "Kenya Johnson wins regional tournament and moves the crowd, dedicating victory to her young daughter." Brooke squeezed the tablet so hard her fingers turned white, the plastic creaking under the pressure. What had started as mere contempt for a perceived inferior had in that instant been twisted into raw, unadulterated fear. And that fear, in turn, ignited into a searing, uncontrollable rage. She simply could not, would not accept that the woman who cleaned the very corners of her house, the woman she so casually dismissed, was not only a genuine threat to her carefully cultivated reputation, but was also inexplicably winning the attention and perhaps even the affection of her own brother. Her reflection appeared in the mirror beside her, and for the first time, Brooke didn't see superiority or arrogance in her own face. She saw desperation, stark and terrifying, staring back at her. The stage was set, not just for a jiu-jitsu match, but for a public reckoning that would expose far more than just martial arts skills. The crisp, bright Sunday sky, a stark contrast to the brewing storm within the Whitmore family, cast a deceptively peaceful glow over Buckhead. Yet inside the sprawling mansion, the mood was anything but serene. The meticulously manicured backyard, usually reserved for leisurely strolls and exclusive garden parties, had been transformed into an improvised arena. Elegant chairs, arranged in neat rows, now encircled a freshly laid mat, turning the verdant lawn into a stage for the day's highly anticipated and deeply unsettling spectacle. This was the friendly match Brooke had mockingly announced, a jiu-jitsu showdown designed to entertain the elite while publicly humiliating a quiet maid. But to Kenya, there was nothing remotely friendly about this afternoon. Among the curious guests, familiar faces from Atlanta's local elite mingled, their whispers carrying across the manicured grass. Businessmen with practiced smiles, athletes whose physiques spoke of disciplined ambition, and politicians whose every gesture seemed calculated for effect, all sipped champagne, observing the unfolding drama as if attending a summer theater performance. Beneath the veneer of polite society, hidden bets were placed and malicious whispers circulated, fueled by the intoxicating allure of scandal. The fight between the lady of the house and the maid was already a viral topic, its sordid details spreading like wildfire even before the first move was made. Ethan watched from a distance, near a discreet side entrance, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, his jaw a rigid line. He wore a simple white shirt open at the collar, a stark contrast to the formal attire of the guests, his eyes fixed intently on the mat. When he saw Kenya appear through the ancient trees, his heart gave a visceral lurch, a sudden powerful beat against his ribs. She walked with an undeniable presence, clad in simple black pants and a fitted white t-shirt, her feet bare on the cool grass. There were no logos emblazoned on her attire, no official uniform, no visible medals or trophies from her past to announce her prowess. Yet her steps were firm, silent, imbued with a quiet power, and her gaze fixed on the mat was pure, unyielding steel, a quiet force of nature preparing for battle. Minutes later, Brooke made her grand entrance, a vision of carefully constructed confidence. Her black belt was tied perfectly, a stark symbol of her rank, and her custom-made jai, stitched with her name in glittering gold, seemed to announce her victory before the fight had even begun. She walked with an exaggerated swagger, waving to the assembled guests with a rehearsed, almost theatrical confidence, soaking in the attention. "Let's make this quick," she called out to Kenya, her voice sharp and dismissive as she approached the mat. "I don't want to be late for dinner." Kenya met her gaze calmly, her expression unreadable. "Don't worry," she replied, her voice steady. "It won't take long." The announcer, a nervous figure, signaled the start of the match. The ambient sounds of the garden faded, and for a suspended moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The two women exchanged minimal, almost perfunctory gestures of greeting, and then the fight began. In the first few seconds, Brooke advanced with a deceptive agility, her movements precise, showcasing her practiced technique. She attempted a lateral takedown, swiftly managing to control Kenya's torso, and with a practiced skill locked her arm, seemingly gaining the upper hand. A ripple of applause spread through the guests, many convinced this would be a quick, decisive win for the heiress. Ethan leaned forward, his body tensed, a knot of worry tightening in his stomach. But Kenya didn't fight like someone desperately trying to win. She fought like someone who had already survived countless battles, whose very existence was a testament to resilience. With a surgical calm that belied the intensity of the moment, she subtly adjusted her hips, turned her body with an almost imperceptible shift, and executed a quick, fluid spin that even caught Brooke off guard. In a flash, she escaped the hold, and in one precise, devastating movement, trapped Brooke's leg with both arms. Brooke tried to react, her eyes widening in surprise and dawning panic, but her center of gravity was already irrevocably lost. A stunned silence fell over the garden, the only sound the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. With a firm, controlled move, Kenya brought her down. There was no brute force, no unnecessary violence, just absolute, undeniable control. Brooke hit the mat, breathless, her eyes stunned, the air knocked out of her. She struggled, attempting to escape the hold, but Kenya, with a reverse arm lock, kept her pinned, utterly immobilized. Then, with her face close to Brooke's, her voice a low, cutting whisper that only the two of them could hear, Kenya delivered the ultimate humiliation. "You wanted to expose me. Now look who's exposed." Brooke tapped the mat, a desperate, frantic gesture, signaling her surrender. Humiliated, defeated, she lay trapped beneath the quiet strength of the woman she had so carelessly underestimated. For a few agonizing seconds, no one in the crowd reacted. A collective gasp, then a stunned silence. Then, slowly, tentatively, the unexpected applause began. It started timidly from one or two guests, then others joined in, a soft, growing wave of sound spreading across the garden. It wasn't applause for the spectacle, or for the skill of the victor in the way they might applaud a professional athlete. It was applause for the sheer surprise, for the unexpected dignity of someone no one had expected to see there, for the quiet triumph of true strength over arrogant privilege. Kenya stood up, her breathing steady, her posture as poised as ever, and extended a hand to Brooke. The magnate's daughter, her face twisted with silent rage and profound shame, merely looked at Kenya with blazing eyes, then turned her face away, refusing the gesture of sportsmanship. Ethan, watching from his vantage point, could no longer hold back the surge of emotion. His eyes welled up, his chest conflicted with an overwhelming mix of pride and a strange, profound ache. He had never been so proud of anyone in his entire life. He had never felt so strongly, so undeniably, that standing before him was a woman who would fundamentally change the course of his life. Kenya walked off the mat with slow, deliberate steps. She didn't smile. She didn't raise her arms in triumph. She hadn't fought for applause or for a trophy or for the fleeting recognition of the elite. She had fought for respect. And for the very first time in that house, she had been truly seen, truly heard. From the upper balcony of the mansion, George Whitmore, the patriarch, watched everything unfold below, his expression utterly unreadable, a silent witness to the unraveling of his carefully constructed world. Behind him, Brooke, her blonde hair now loose and disheveled, climbed the stairs alone, her pride shattered, her carefully crafted image in shambles. But the night was far from over, and neither were the profound consequences of what had just transpired. Night fell over Buckhead, cloaking the sprawling mansions in shadows. But the Whitmore mansion was far from its usual hushed quietude. After Kenya's unexpected stunning victory, the guests scattered into small, agitated groups throughout the garden, their hushed conversations filled with a mixture of shock, admiration, and in some cases, sheer discomfort. What was supposed to be a private, elitist prank, a casual humiliation, had turned into an undeniable upset, a public spectacle that had backfired spectacularly. The humiliation had landed squarely on the wrong side of the bed, not on the maid, but on the heiress. Brooke, her face still marked by the sheen of sweat and the raw sting of wounded pride, climbed the grand staircase with heavy, dragging steps. Her custom G, now misaligned and disheveled, no longer symbolized control or dominance. Instead, it became a poignant symbol of her shattered mask, the tattered remnants of someone who had lost far more than just a jiu-jitsu match. Meanwhile, Kenya remained near the side of the house, engaging in a brief, quiet conversation with the housekeeper, gently declining the congratulations offered by two other staff members. She was about to re-enter through the back door, seeking the quiet solitude of her duties, when she heard Brooke's rapid footsteps returning to the garden. "So that's it?" Brooke shouted, her voice laced with a furious, almost desperate fire as she stormed down the stairs again. "You didn't want respect. You wanted the Whitmore name." All eyes in the garden turned to her, the guests falling silent, surprised by the raw, unbridled fury in her tone. Kenya turned slowly, her expression utterly devoid of emotion, a calm against Brooke's storm. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said, her voice a low, steady murmur, attempting to maintain a fragile peace. "Of course you are," Brooke shot back, a bitter, derisive laugh escaping her lips. "You seduced my brother, played humble, played quiet, and now you want a seat at the table. That's what you do, isn't it? Climb the social ladder, pretending to be a victim." Ethan stepped forward then, his voice cutting through the tense air, louder and more resolute than anyone expected. "That's enough, Brooke." She turned, startled, but he didn't back down, his green eyes blazing with a newfound conviction. "You want to talk about manipulation? About appearances?" he challenged, his voice rising. "You don't see anyone but your own reflection." An uncomfortable silence, thick with unspoken truths, took over the garden. "Since you were a teenager, everything had to revolve around you," Ethan continued, his voice laced with years of suppressed frustration. "If someone shines, you dim them. If someone loves, you mock them. Kenya did nothing but be herself, and that threatens you more than any loss." Brooke's gaze shifted between disbelief and a dawning, painful realization. George Whitmore, who had remained inside the house until then, stepped out onto the patio with a stern, authoritative expression. He saw the chaos, the raw emotion, and attempted to contain the volatile situation with a discreet, placating gesture. "Brooke, Ethan, please, this is not the time." "No, Dad," Ethan interrupted, his voice firm, unwavering. "That time has long passed, and as long as everyone keeps pretending nothing's wrong, she'll keep stepping on people who can't fight back." Kenya looked at Ethan, her face reflecting a complex mix of emotion, but beneath it, something deeper, an unwavering resolve. "It's okay," she said firmly, her voice clear and strong. "I don't need this." She turned from the family drama, facing the housekeeper and the other staff members, her voice imbued with the same quiet dignity she had displayed just hours earlier in the fight. "I'll finish my shift tomorrow. I'll leave everything clean, organized, and at peace. But after that, I'm not coming back." Ethan stepped forward, a desperate plea in his eyes. "You don't have to leave because of her." Kenya looked at him kindly, her gaze unwavering but with an unshakable firmness. "I'm not leaving because of her," she stated, her voice a quiet declaration of independence. "I'm leaving because I won't stay in a place where my existence needs to be justified." She turned, her back to the stunned family, and entered the house, leaving behind a silence so profound no one dared to break it. Brooke stood frozen for a few seconds, as if she had lost control of her own performance, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. When she finally looked around and saw the judging eyes of the guests, even her own father's, she lowered her head, utterly defeated by a truth even her immense ego could no longer hide. Ethan remained alone in the garden, his heart torn between outrage at his family's behavior and a profound sense of helplessness. He didn't know how yet, but he knew, with a burning certainty, that he would do whatever it took to change that ending. Because for the first time, it wasn't the house, the mansion, or the family legacy that truly mattered. It was the human connection, the dignity, and the profound loss of someone who walked away when its door closed. This was the moment Ethan, the undercover heir, made his definitive choice to become the CEO of his own values, ready to dismantle the old world to build a new one. The night hung heavy over Atlanta, the distant glow of the wealthy Buckhead mansions now seeming oddly cold and distant to Ethan. His luxury vehicle, a symbol of the world he was rapidly leaving behind, wove through narrow streets and past modest, time-forgotten hills in the opposite direction. The GPS barely registered in this unfamiliar territory, yet he didn't care. Something far stronger, an undeniable certainty, guided him forward. He couldn't let her leave without saying what desperately needed to be said. He had to face her, not as the heir of the Whitmore legacy, but as a man stripped bare of pretense. The neighborhood where Kenya lived was simple, yet vibrant, pulsating with a raw, authentic life. Children laughed and played on the sidewalks, their voices echoing in the dusk. Neighbors chatted comfortably on their porches, glasses of iced tea clinking softly, and the rich, comforting aroma of homemade food filled the evening air, a stark contrast to the sterile perfection of the Whitmore mansion. Ethan walked slowly, dressed in a simple light blue linen shirt and soft slacks, a conscious shedding of his former world. He felt curious eyes on him, a stranger in their midst, but he didn't waver. He climbed the 2 weathered wooden steps of a humble house, a clothesline strung casually in the side yard. On the porch, Kenya sat in an old rocking chair, a familiar blanket draped over her knees, an open book resting in her lap. Beside her, a girl, perhaps 8 years old, played quietly with handmade dolls, their yarn hair braided with loving care. It was Kenya's daughter, with the same large, expressive eyes and the same quiet strength her mother carried, a powerful reminder of what Kenya fought for. Kenya looked up, her gaze meeting his, and for a second she didn't move, a silent tableau of surprise and disbelief. Then, with a gentle motion, she closed her book. "How did you find me?" she asked, her voice tinged with astonishment rather than anger. Ethan stepped closer, his heart pounding, every word deliberate. "You showed me more about yourself in 2 weeks than my whole family has in a lifetime," he confessed, his voice earnest, raw with emotion. "I needed to see where that strength was born." Kenya subtly signaled for her daughter to go inside. The girl, obedient and sensing the unspoken weight of the moment, kissed her mother's cheek and disappeared through the screen door, leaving Ethan and Kenya alone on the porch, enveloped in a charged silence. "You should be at the mansion," Kenya said, crossing her arms, a hint of the practical, self-preserving woman still present. Ethan didn't hesitate, his response swift and unwavering. "And you should be somewhere where you don't have to explain yourself to anyone." He took another step closer, his gaze locked on hers. "I didn't come here on a whim, Kenya. I came because I chose to. I chose to be where you are." She looked down, struggling against the overwhelming urge to believe, to yield to the sincerity in his voice. Ethan took another step, closing the distance between them. "You were never just an employee, never invisible," he declared, his voice thick with the depth of his realization. "You taught me what courage truly is, what it means to stand your ground without losing your soul. And I don't want that house anymore. I don't want those parties, those fake smiles. I want this ground, this truth." Kenya looked at him, torn between the caution that had defined her life and the powerful yearning ignited by his words. "Ethan, I have a daughter. I have bills. I'm not part of your world." His voice was thick with emotion, cutting through her hesitation. "I don't want you to enter my world." He countered, his words a powerful promise. "I want to build a new one with you." A soft veil of silence fell between them once more, the wind gently stirring the leaves of the tree in front of the porch. Her eyes shimmered under the soft glow of the street light, reflecting a hesitant hope. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered, the question fragile, almost afraid to be answered. Ethan stepped even closer, now mere inches from her face, his gaze unwavering, resolute. "I'm sure about you." This time, when he kissed her, Kenya didn't hesitate. She didn't pull back, didn't flinch. She kissed him back, eyes closed, her soul finally open, surrendering to a connection forged not in luxury, but in shared truth and mutual respect. It was a deep kiss, not impulsive passion, but the profound merging of 2 worlds, finally finding their home in each other, without fear, without reservation. Love had finally triumphed over prejudice. In the months that followed, life, and indeed deeply held beliefs, underwent a profound and irreversible transformation. Ethan, a man once defined by his inherited legacy, definitively resigned from every role within the Whitmore family enterprise. He walked away from the bonuses, the coveted positions, and even sold the lavish penthouse he was set to inherit. His decision wasn't one of fleeting rebellion, but a calculated choice, a commitment to a new path. He chose a simple townhouse in South Atlanta, just 2 blocks from where Kenya lived with her daughter. What began as a seemingly temporary move became a permanent foundation, a genuine commitment to building a life rooted in authenticity. Alongside Kenya, Ethan co-founded the Root Project, an initiative dedicated to empowering single mothers and marginalized communities through access to resources, education, and perhaps surprisingly, martial arts training, echoing Kenya's own journey of self-discovery and resilience. This project became the tangible embodiment of his evolution from an undercover heir to a true CEO of purpose, leveraging his innate intelligence and drive for genuine social impact, not just profit. And this truly is just the beginning of their extraordinary story. The journey of Kenya Johnson and Ethan Whitmore, the powerful Root Project they are building together, and the new challenges and triumphs they will undoubtedly face as they navigate this brave new world, continues to unfold. Their tale is a testament to the fact that true strength lies not in the wealth one inherits, but in the character one forges and the respect one earns. This saga is far from over. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single moment of their inspiring adventure. Stay tuned, because the next chapter promises even more drama, more heart, and more powerful revelations. You won't want to miss what happens next.